Welcome to Disengaged, the podcast. I'm Leah Harding, your host. If you look back at my relationship with this guy from day one, and I literally mean the day that I met him, I think it's kind of like picking up a rock, like you're a geologist, and twisting it around and looking at it and thinking, wow, there's a lot to learn here. There's some things that I haven't normally looked at. Wouldn't you just look at a rock? But as a geologist, you're paying attention to all these little nooks and crannies. And that's what I'm trying to do here. You're probably expecting part 2 of the BFF series, and I don't blame you. I thought part 1 was pretty great because Hales just brings a really, really great perspective to everything. But I wanted to pop on here because this is all about vulnerability and backstory and community. And I wanted to kind of take you all back to day 1 when I actually first met the guy who would become my fiancé. I think there are a lot of little tidbits of information looking back that have been very helpful in trying to self-advocate moving forward and just identify things that don't fit off the bat, because I think we go into a lot of relationships. I know I have in the past just thinking this is a good feeling, this is probably a great thing for me, and so I'm going to keep doing it. The last few weeks of uncovering all of this information about myself I have felt vulnerable, and I have felt also incredibly grateful to be able to come back to these stories that I lived with a sense of health and mental well-being that I, quite frankly, just have not had for a long time. I've had a kind of challenging last few years, and the idea of doing something like this always sounded appealing, but I just knew that I wasn't quite ready for it. And I know, the only way to do it is to do it, but there was a block, and I'm really glad that I waited. So, to get to my point, day 1 of meeting this guy, I think is absolutely fascinating. So, we ended up in a car together because we were out in the desert. He had jet skis, and we were dropping some people from our small group from church off at one part of the desert, and someone needed to drive to another part to go and set up camp so we could hang out for the day. And this all sounds very weird and survivory. So it came to this point where the group was like, okay, a lot of people are taking the jet skis, and then the rest of us are going to carpool over to this other part of the desert where we're going to set up camp and hang out for a little while. And he was like, does anyone want to ride with me? And I was like, sure. Okay. Didn't think anything of it. And I got in the car and I'm like, interesting. There's possibly something here, but let me just probe a little bit. And I was like, okay, so, what do you do? Tell me about yourself. What are you looking for, in life? Not in a relationship. And I immediately had no interest in this life that he was painting. The first thing that I said after he told me that, I'm not kidding, direct quote, good luck with that. That initial response could have served me really, really well if I had listened to it. Would we be here now talking about on a podcast about me ending an engagement? No, but it would have really alleviated a lot of different things if I had just kind of trusted that initial gut instinct of this is really not a very good fit. His life desires were simply different than mine. Neither good nor bad for either of us. They were just very different. What he wanted off the bat, something I did not want, and vice versa. And so later on, funny enough, when we were dating, I actually got him the coordinates of where I said good luck with that, and I put it on a keychain and gave it to him. I really leaned into that one. It should have been more of a sign, but what I did hang on to as a sign, interestingly, was a few weeks later, we went out to the desert again, just the two of us, to watch a meteor shower. I told him, you're not kissing me. There's nothing physical here. I'll go with you if we can just watch this meteor shower. We ended up talking on the sand dunes until 6 a.m. And I remember very clearly sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this is my husband. And I feel like God is telling me that this is the guy that I'm going to be with. And I had total calm and peace about that. But I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. marry this guy. Like, I didn't know what it would feel like to meet your husband, and this must be it because I have a lot of clarity, and this seems like a really, really good idea. Well, I hung on to that because I'm like, well, God spoke, so that's it. That really did carry me through so many years of turbulence because I was convinced that I had heard from God himself and that was the blessing that was on my life. And so who was I to screw it up? Who was he to screw it up? We actually did break up at one point, and I relied on that moment on the dunes when I had that clarity to really push to try to at some point get back together. And we were broken up for like 10 months, and we ended up getting back together. And I don't think I would have even been open to it if I hadn't had such clarity that one night on the dunes. Why was that the night that I clung to? Why did I not cling to the day in the desert with the good luck with that moment? Like, I think I picked what I wanted, which would seem more appealing. I find that fascinating. There are so many little bloop moments that seem like, yeah, this is such affirmation. But we've got to look at those bloop moments that are like, no, or just your body just straight up rejecting the situation. Like, our body and our nervous system can tell us so much. And yeah, I should have listened to one of them and not the other. But, you know, hindsight's 20/20. And I learned a lot from listening to the God section and not the jet ski section. But another thing that I wanted to pop on here and say is that there were people along the way that thought this was not a good idea. People, I'll call them dissenters, not dementors, though sometimes they felt like dementors. This includes family and really close friends. So there were people that thought this wasn't a good idea. What I would do is be like, I would think, well, they clearly just don't know him well enough. Like, I'm spending all this time with him. His friends know him really well. There's enough people that think this is a good idea that I'm just going to keep going with it. And kind of brush off any concern from others as, well, they don't know him like I do. I know him better, and if they knew him the way I did, they would think this would be a great idea too. I think pulling the crowd was probably not the best idea because I was unable to make these decisions for myself, which we talked about in episode 1. A lack of self-advocacy from the beginning. And I think when you don't have self-advocacy, a way to know that is, are you asking everyone for their opinion on what you should do or what you should think or who you should love? Are you literally asking everyone? Because I was. I really was. I thought, if I pull the crowd and enough people say yes, then that's the green light for me to move ahead. And I didn't consult myself. It's almost like I couldn't. There was a major block. We'll get through more and more of what that block is as this podcast evolves. But I think that this whole we were meant to be concept, and well, I had peace that one night, and well, some people think this is a good idea, and then trying to force that narrative on others who maybe didn't have such a clear idea. I think that got me into a really big pickle. I would have these doubts along the way, and I just chose to really focus on the ones that kind of propelled me more and more towards staying together. Because honestly, the idea of ending things felt sad and unnecessary. Because why would I want to be alone again in the desert lands and in this, world where it can be difficult to be on your own, and it can be hard to be a woman just figuring out your life on your own, just you and your job and your friends and your colleagues. Like, you want a partner. And I thought maybe this was a great partner. And he had so many great qualities and so many things that I loved about him. And I truly did love him. I really did. I just think I focused so hard on the things that brought me peace instead of the real obvious ones that even I knew from the beginning probably wouldn't match up great. So I think there's a lot to learn from that, and it kind of gives you a little bit more context into where I'm coming from. Hopefully some of that resonates with you as well. And again, it's not just about engagements. It can be for decisions like about which job to take or to quit, or even what kind of car to buy. Like, what do you want? What are your non-negotiables? If you want a car with leather seats and a back windshield wiper, and you're looking at cars that have neither, but you saw a great advertisement for them, maybe go back to your original list. We have preferences for a reason. I think we need to listen to them. And we need to be aware of how things just simply don't match up. And I was really, I think, in hindsight, putting a square peg into a round hole. I just wanted that to work so badly because so much of it was good. But a lot of the fundamental things were just missing. And a lot of it had to do with faith, our perspective on women in the church and where to live and how to raise children. Do you give your kid a morning after pill if they come home one day when they're a teenager and said, they made a mistake? Or do you not? These are conversations that we had and I think others should have that really help answer questions that on the day-to-day, are we going to actually pair up or are we just trying to make this work? Because being alone seems really scary. So I think we were meant to be seasonally. It was a seasonal meant to be. I think it was good while it lasted. We tried to make it more of a permanent thing than it should have been. It was not shelf-stable milk. It was non-pasteurized milk that was going to go bad pretty quickly, and we needed to just let that process play out. But it was no, we're going to make this work. I think we both really tried to make it work. And I didn't really have the tools to put a stop to it in a way that I would now. And so that's why we're here. This is just a little vignette because I don't want you to think all of the episodes are 40 minutes. The next one might be, but they're not all going to be that. These little pop-ins and check-ins, I think, hopefully you enjoy them as much as I like making them because it's just me and you. As much as I love having guests on the show, I really like just talking to you. If you have questions or you have comments, I think Instagram is probably the best way. My handle is @via_Leah, or you can just search my name, Leah Harding, and it should show up. You can also go to the Connect tab on my website at leahharding.com. But if you bring me some of your questions, I can bring them up here and we can talk about them, because this is a community after all. PodFam, I think you guys are awesome. And also another thing, if you would, is subscribe to this podcast and also like it. That really, really helps me. It helps with ratings. It helps get this podcast out there. It helps people know that it exists. So let's share the love. And if you'd help me out just a little bit, I feel bad asking for anything, but I'm self-advocating. I would really like it if you did that. Anyway, it's been real. I love y'all. And part 2 is coming up. This podcast was produced by the Anthology Group.